And with that, let's bring in our first guest. How are you? How are you? How are you?
How are you? Thank you for having me.
It's great. We this time of the year we get bogged down with candidates because of the primary. So the thoughtfulness of our co-host Lorraine Lopez, we decided to do some of the candidates on Tuesday so we could actually get back to issues and spotlighting people in the community on our Sunday show. And you are definitely somebody that we want to definitely spotlight and highlight. And for those who don't know, Joanne Dunn and the youth shelter of Westchester. Hopefully, you're about to learn something right now, and find out who she is and what they do, and why you need to know who she is.
Absolutely. So thank you for having me again. I'm really excited to be here. I'm also kind of nervous. I'm not a person that does a lot of talking. I just like to do the work. So
Well,
can you guys hear me pretty well?
we hear you well. We hear you well. Yes.
All right,
And
good.
the last issue, well, the issue before last was this April, March, I guess was Women's Month, and I did an issue where we celebrated a lot of unsung heroes. Because one of the things my mother, who passed 7 years ago, she always said, give me my roses while I'm alive.
Amen.
So this is our giving you your roses part
Oh,
of the show. While you are alive, you are an unsung hero, and we want to change that and make sure people know who you are.
thank you. I appreciate that as the first female executive director here at the Youth Shelter Program of Westchester. So I really appreciate that. So you tell me when I'm ready to jump in because I'd like to give the audience just a preview of the
Okay.
youth shelter because I think it's one of Westchester's best kept secrets, and I think that we need to elevate the voice of the youth shelter along with making sure that we have more youth shelters to really tackle the issues of justice involve young people. So
I'm going to get right to that. But before I do, um, the man, the myth, the legend, he's actually here, Damon K. Jones. It is not an optical illusion. Yeah, David my partner David is with us today.
hi, Damon. Nice to
How
see
you
you.
doing? How you doing? What's
Good.
up, Bob? Hey, Bob.
Uncle D, what's happening, man? Miss Dunn, how are you? It's a pleasure to meet you on
You
air.
too, Dr. Bob.
Look
Dr.
forward
Bob.
to the exchange and you giving us information about the wonderful services y'all provide. D, it's good to see you, baby.
Yeah, I'm gonna log over real quick. I get my light. I gotta get my light correct. So,
Okay,
Okay.
no
all right,
problem.
I'll be right back.
All right, no doubt. So, Joanne, let's start with what is the Youth Shelter of Westchester? How long has it been around? What is it that y'all do?
So the Youth Shelter Program of Westchester has been around for 40 years,
Wow.
providing what I call a residential alternative to incarceration program. So for young people ages prior to raise the age, we were focusing on young people 16 to 21. And what we would do is take young people, instead of them serving their time at the county jail, they would serve their time with us here in a home-like setting. What is unique about the youth shelter, while we might be housed in Mount Vernon, we serve the entire county. And so we get young people from across this county that have benefited from the services of the youth shelter.
Okay. So you are in Mount Vernon. First off, let me just say, we want at Black Westchester and here on People Before Politics, we're always talking about criminal justice reform, and we're always talking about alternatives to incarceration. So to hear that there's an organization that also deals with that, especially with our youth, I definitely wanted to have you on to talk about that. Um, waiting for Damon to get seated. He's still moving around a little bit. And Damon, everybody knows Damon's been at corrections for 31 years and is the head of Blacks in Law Enforcement of America. And he's always talking about alternatives to incarceration, stuff like that too. We can't just arrest our problems away, and that's what's being done. And, after George Floyd, and the national outcry after that, there is a real big call for all forms of police reform, and one of that is alternatives to incarceration. So I'm glad to, and I definitely want to hear more about it. Welcome back, David.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I've been here now at the youth shelter for about a year. And of course, like you said, I mean, last year, not only did we have to deal with COVID, but we had a whole, the country was in an awakening state, right? We knew that Black and brown communities were over policed for years. And I think what happened is it started to bubble out of control. And then we had social media that allowed us to capture these moments and share them on a national platform. But for me, as a woman coming here to the shelter, work here becomes very personal because I'm raising 2 Black sons. And so what I love about the youth shelter is that we really offer a young person, what we say here is that you're far better than the worst thing that you've ever done, right? And by the time you're 40, you're going to look back over your life and say, I was 18 when I did that. I was 19. You have your whole life ahead of you. And I think that we understand here this notion of what we call restorative justice, because you will see that brain science tells us that young people's minds don't develop until they're in their mid-20s, right? So everybody got it right. When you look at healthcare, young people are on their parents' health insurance until they're 26. You can actually stay in school until you're 21, right? To get your high school diploma. You can stay, health insurance. But I think the justice system we're still, while we raise the age, right? And we now are charging young people up at 18 with adult criminal responsibility, but 18 is not the beginning. 18 is just the beginning of when young people become adults. And I think that our justice system has a lot more ways to go when we think about age appropriate solutions to justice. That's what we call it here. Because at 18, it is not that one is an adult, it is the beginning of adulthood. And so there is a lot of work that still needs to be done to make sure that we can restore and reshape the lives of young people. And that's what our work here at the youth shelter is really all about, taking young people and really helping them rethink and reshape their lives.
Now, because it's election time, and I will be interviewing a lot of elected officials, and a lot of them are watching the show or will watch it, on Black Westchester later. One of the things Damon and I always talk about, and Bob talk about, is legislation, the need for legislation. So speaking to the elected officials, the state, the federal, the county, what can they do to help what you do as far as legislation? What legislation would
I think as far as legislation, when I think of here and really in the criminal justice, we raise the age, but we need to raise the age a bit further, right? We need to think of this notion of young people really 18 to 24, because brain science tells us at the age of 25 is when a young person really flips to adulthood. And I think we need to think of raising the age beyond the age of 18 and also expanding youthful offender status, right? If we're talking about really restoring, or this notion of restorative justice, we need to think about youthful offender status being beyond the age of 18. And that a young person, a first-time offense, a violation of probation, that these are opportunities that a young person could be afforded a youthful offender status as well. I think that when we think about also, we need to think about lowering the barriers of entry, right? Housing is a major issue for a lot of returning citizens. Employment, right? Because we ban the box, but yet we still kind of quote unquote discriminate on people who have, criminal backgrounds. And so I think we need to look at lowering the barriers of entry for housing, employment, even also with healthcare, right? I know there's a lot of issues, but legislative wise in regards to criminal justice, I think that there's 2 things that I hang my hat on right now. And that is raising the age beyond the age of 18. I would almost say to 25, but I'll accept 21 at this time. But then I would also say that we need to expand youthful offender status. And then what we need to look at is really, how do we really embed community alternatives and really invoke diversionary programming to make sure that young people are not coming in the pipeline. We talk a lot about this school to prison pipeline, but we need to talk about community to prison pipeline, right? If we don't invest in community and the resources there, these young people, they're left with nothing but trouble. So I think we need to think about making sure that our programs or our resources in each community reflect the diversity of this county, that what happens in Scarsdale mimics in Mount Vernon, right? Exactly.
Now, I'm going to turn it over to Damon, who can talk about it from the other side, from corrections and the need for the work that it is that you do. Go ahead, Damon.
I think what Sister Joanne is saying is 100% true. right? We invest in corrections, but we don't invest in preventive, right? To invest in our and actually invest in our youth, especially here in Westchester County. We know what the problem is, but our elected officials have failed. I've been locked up as an officer my whole adult life. I started when I turned 21. I'm 52 years old, right? So I've been there 31 years. I get it. I see it, right? When young Black males come to jail and they tell me as a correction officer that I'm more like their father than their father out on the street. And I'm still, and at that time when that man told me, I'm still a young man myself, but because of the position that I have and the position of power that I wield in the correctional facility, I am their father. I tell them when to wake up. I tell them when to eat. I tell them when they go out to rec. I tell them to do all that. But we have to invest on the outside. And that was my argument with the county and with the state when they was letting people out for COVID. And I said, well, if you're going to put them out on the street, there is more programs in jail than there is on the street. They could get training in jail, but they're not afford training on the street. We got this thing backwards.
We do.
So, and it's been a long time that we have this thing backwards. We invested in correctional facilities, but we don't invest in community centers. We don't invest in vocational training. We don't invest in mental health, right? We don't invest in all these things that we need to invest in because we have to invest in the social problems before they become criminal problems.
Exactly.
And that's the problem that I see with elected officials. This sister's doing what she has to do on her end, but the politicians now, if they want to talk the talk, they have to walk the walk. They have to invest in social programs.
I so agree with
you. Especially the Black communities. If we're gonna turn the tide on crime and violence in the Black communities, and we also have an influx of homeless children in Westchester County. See, we get it twisted. We think Westchester County, and we think Jay-Z and Beyonce, and we think, big time pastors and Black enterprise, and we think all that great stuff. But on the other hand of all that great stuff, I haven't talked in a long time, so trust me, I got a lot of things.
Damon, you're speaking what we all know, right? And I think Liz
Exactly.
If we invest in the social problems, we could eliminate the criminal responsibilities. And I think for me coming here to the shelter, I'm delighted that the shelter has been around but for 40 years, right? Mm-hmm. But for me, I'm like, if it's around another 40 years, then that's a problem. Like at the end of the day, my job is to put myself out of business. Exactly. Because I would like to flip it, because I almost, as a woman of color raising two young men, I said to myself when I got here, I love the work that the shelter does. It is an intervention to help young people who are coming into the justice system to really get them out of it, right? And I think the work that we do here is so crucial. It's so vital. However, for me, it's almost as if it's too late too, right? Because technically they're remanded to incarceration. And so my thing is that how do we get to the root causes of why young people are even coming to the pipeline from the beginning? And it's not necessarily school for my guys, because they haven't been to school, right? They dropped out of school a long time ago. So these are the ones that are on the block, on the corner. And I think it's what you said, Damon, is when we invest in community, right? Exactly. Like I think about a lot of my young people who they're here on their first robbery charge, right? Because they robbed a bodega. And then when you get to the root causes of why they robbed the bodega, it was because I was hungry, Miss Dunn, so I robbed them, Exactly. And so when you start to dig deeper into the root causes and the trauma that these young people have faced, either because they have broken infrastructure or they had certain insecurities where their parents or whatever. And so when you start to deal with the whole child, you see that this young person is a young person truly crying for help, really in need of that guidance, that support, that that person to help guide them through. And I think what I love about the youth shelter is, while I'm the first woman, and I have to go back, the youth shelter is an all male facility. So you think about the youth shelter. I have young people here now, ages 18 to 24, who are young men, and we treat them like young men. We treat them like young men. We call them young scholars because we want them to start to think about what they can attain and what they can be. And so, they say to me, you're like a mom to me. And I say, yeah, but I'm still gonna pop you upside the head when you were wrong, because I want you to know that you're gonna go out there and you're gonna achieve something, that you're far better than the worst thing that you've ever done. Our work here at the youth shelter is hinged on a lot of clinical, like Damon said, the mental health aspect, because a lot of these young people, we have to start to dig to their core to understand how they got here from the beginning. And if we're talking about breaking, behaviors, you got to dig into the cognitive or the root causes of why they even got here. And so we do a lot of clinical pieces. We work in hand. We have clinical social workers on board. And then we do a lot of, we're hinged on a lot of educational, vocational, and also what we call hybrid training programs. We're not saying college is not the next step for our young people, but when they leave here, we want them to really have a skill set, have the academic bills to go with it, the academic suite, and then go out there and get that job, go work, right? Because employment is a key factor for young people not to recidivize, to not come back in the pipeline. However, though, when we think of Mount Vernon, right, and I think of right now where we're hitched at, it's a great place because we're in an industrial area of Mount Vernon, but then the jobs are mom and pop jobs. So I think that, again, when we talk about, we have to break down a lot of political stuff, because we need politicians, legislators. We need to invest in communities, right? We need jobs in these areas. And a lot of my young people come from, let me just stop here for a minute. There's 2 tracks many times. Well, there's 3 now. Northern Westchester, I get a lot of young people from Peekskill. I get people from Yonkers, and of course, Mount Vernon. Mm-hmm. But when you look at it, those places, jobs are limited. Jobs are few and far between, right? And so we need to think about again, I said, lowering the barriers or the entry points for jobs, but then also making sure there's jobs available for people to get into. And then housing, of course, we need to make sure that there's equitable housing here. If you look at Mount Vernon, there's pockets of poverty or what I call, I hate to use this term on live broadcast, but slumlords, right?
They are.
Yeah, slumlords here in Mount Vernon or in Yonkers who are kind of using their, they're kind of getting quote unquote rich off the poor, right? In that sense. And so, I think about a lot of my young people who, if their housing is not appropriate, guess what? They're going to end up right back at my door. So my next step for me at the youth shelter is really fighting to make sure that we have what I call, when you were coming home from downstate, they had in previous years, they had halfway houses, right? Mm-hmm. And while I would never use that term because the term is just a negative term, I think we need to think of transitional living facilities for emerging youth, right? Who are in that 18 to 24 bracket that need a place to stay, but also need like a youth shelter to help them keep staying on the right path, to learn how to budget, to learn how to do laundry, to learn how to go to job and come home and do your household duties. And so I'm really focused on a transitional living facility for young people who are 18 to 25, who are justice involved. Because like Damon said, and if you see what the report that Westchester Children's Association put out last year, a lot of young people are informally homeless. And that's a lot of reasons why young people are coming into the pipeline for the justice system. And so housing is a major issue.
Yeah, the director, after they did the report, we had the director on, and the Anti-Racism Alliance, we had them on because they worked on that report as well. Damon and then Bob wanted to say something as well.
Bob, I want, and Bob, you could respond to this too. What Sister said was so important, right? She said you have Mount Vernon, Yonkers, Peekskill. In 1992, I'm going to go back, man, because see, we knew what the problem was. In 1992, the African American Advisory Board gave a report to then County Exec Andrew O'Rourke. And they predicted in 1992 what was going to happen to Mount Vernon, Yonkers, Peekskill, and Portchester. But we're dealing now with the residual effects of the lack of investment, right? We're dealing with the inequality. We're dealing with the poor school systems. All this was in a report in 1992. So everything that this sister is dealing with in the shelter was predicted in 1992. So we're still dealing with the social issues of the failures of a government that gave a report that knew the problem. They knew the problem. See, and that's when I was telling Bob that report was so important because it predicted everything that Black and brown people are dealing with today, even economics, even job structure, right? All that stuff in Westchester County, how White Plains is White Plains, white people, and they purposely moved
White
Black people out,
Plains, yes.
right? So that's a whole nother. But when we're talking about dealing with our youth, and we're talking about the lack of investment, we're talking about the lack of Black teachers throughout Westchester County, right? Our educational system, right? Our economic system, our family structure, right? All this was known to elected officials that are high up on the political scale right now, because back in 1992, they were city council people and they were on different boards and they were county legislators. So, we failed we failed, and elected officials failed. And I don't care. I say I haven't talked in a long time. And our
Did we lose David?
Looks like it.
He got froze in the middle of he got froze. Well, I just want to say one thing and about that. We also, and I want to after Bob talks, I want to switch to we need to do to get them before they get to you.
Exactly.
In early late 1990s, the early 2000s, Damon and I, him as a correction officer, me as the men's ministry of St. Catherine's Amy Zion Church in Rochelle, we were trying to start a prison ministry because the correction officer said when they get there to talk some sense into these kids, it's too late. They're already there. And the correction officers wanted to be able to go out and talk to these kids beforehand. And we were trying to put something together that it didn't get off the ground. And then I ended up moving to Atlanta. But Bob talked, and then I want to talk about what can we do to prevent them from coming to see you or ending up where Damon is. That's go ahead, Bob.
So, Joanne, I wanted to say that the mission of the youth shelters is especially resonant with me because, as some listeners know, I was one of those young men who needed an alternative to incarceration after I was locked up in the late 1980s for a couple of drug possession charges. And lucky for me, and here I want to make a direct plea to all elected officials who may be listening. Lucky for me, there was some sort of modest but significant social safety net. I was fortunate, went back to school at Bronx Community, partly with the assistance of the Mount Vernon Mayor's office. They had a mayor scholarship at the time, I think the Sharp scholarship, I believe. And in addition, there were persons like yourself at Bronx Community College who were there to help me out. We had a paralegal program that offered extra assistance to, those who were exiting the system. And I was fortunate to meet someone just like you, Joanne, who kind of shepherded me through the process. Absolutely. And those were very modest investments. I think today we realize that it's been decades of neglect of our social safety infrastructure, and that we need to begin to make an investment of the kind that's going to allow us to really get through the social crisis that we're experiencing. And I do just want to finally say that your call for alternatives and for legislators to explore them are especially important because just this week, Brett Kavanaugh issued an opinion from the Supreme Court, which really weakened youthful incarceration policies that generally exempted non-adults from serious lifetime sentences, and that appears to be in jeopardy. So I think our legislators have their task cut out for them.
That I would say, and I think, it goes for me, I was 18 once before, and while I didn't necessarily get incarcerated, I made stupid choices, right? We all do at 18, 19, 20, right? We're young and what they call young and dumb, right? We think we know things and we don't necessarily know them. So I always say to people, who in their lifetime doesn't need a second chance, right? We all do at some point. And I think as a society, we have to decide what our responsibility is to our young people, right? And I think that as we continue to think about criminal justice, the criminal justice system and policing and the reform of it, we know that we need to invest in families. We need to invest in communities. We need to invest in our children, and we need to invest in our youth, right? We know that our community program, our community alternatives, they're the bedrocks of really changing the narrative, right? Community is what is going to help solve this issue of policing and justice reform. And so I think that there's a lot of work to be done. I think going back to AJ's point about what we can do, I would have to share here is that, when I got here at the youth shelter, I said, I really want to get into the work of like diversionary, right? I want to get not only just in the intervention and helping young people when they're in incarceration and not only helping them when they're leaving incarceration, but how do I catch them before they even get here? And so we're doing a lot of work with Judge Rice, along with Judge Lyndon Williams and Judge Johnson, Judge Rice in New Rochelle, and Judge Lyndon Williams here in Mount Vernon. And they have opened up what they call specialty courts. And these are courts that are really talking to really maybe divert young people from incarceration. They're called opportunity youth courts, or they're called emerging youth courts. And the goal of really these courts is really to do what we're talking about. How do we catch these young people who keep, coming into the pipeline that are between the ages of 18 to 24? And how do we provide them with programming so we can revert them from having an entree into the criminal justice system? And so we're doing a lot of work there. A lot of these programs are kicking off the ground. I think that on a state level, they see the need to really think about youth and young adults as one and the same. While there's younger youth, there are older youth. And I think that that's something that prior to 2019 wasn't really explored, right? We thought we raised the age and we thought that that was good enough, right? We thought that, okay, now we got to 18 and now we're settled. And now we're seeing with the science and the context of brain development that no, we really need to stop and really work with young people prior to, right, up until the age of 25. So there's a lot more work to be done. I encourage your audience to really go out and learn about the youth shelter, to learn about the work that we're doing here. They can visit us on our website, but I would say stay tuned because there's a lot more work that's going to be going on, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And I would say as the youth shelter, we can't do this work alone, right? And I think that if I had my way, I would almost open up more youth shelters throughout the county, right? Because while we only serve 12 young men at one capacity, there's a need for 100 beds, right? There's a need for more opportunities like this. And I think that there's this notion that we need to explore a youth shelter on real wheels to really talk about where we're going.
We have a question. It says the SCOTUS decision is wrong and misguided. How could anyone under the age of 18 be found to be permanently incorrigible? Who exactly are these children for whom this discipline applies?
So that's actually from my PR team, because that was a part of recently, there was a SCOTUS decision in regards to juveniles being sentenced to life without parole. Right. And if we're talking about young people and we're talking about restoring this notion of restorative justice, how can we say that children are really born bad, right? Exactly. That children have no opportunity to correct their wrongs and make them right. And we think that decision here at the youth shelter is a wrong decision. We think that children can be, there's an opportunity to restore and reshape. again, we believe that with transformational work, and it takes time, you know, I think that programs like the youth shelter are very, they're like one of its kind, because it allows that intimacy to get to know a young person on a level that you get to touch them in their core to really understand how they can turn their life around. And so that decision, we're really fighting that decision. We are going out publicly to also say that we need to, we don't that they think the Supreme Court made a right decision there.
Well, I'm, you know, being in corrections for over 30 years, I don't even, it's not just young people, it's adults also. I've seen grown men that will come to jail and work 3 to 4 jobs at $1 a job and to put their family outside. But the problem is, when they leave jail, they can't find a job.
Exactly.
So if they're able to work 3 jobs at $1 a day, so that's $3 a day, right? They could work 1 job at $15 to $20 an hour. So, you know, we, as I continue to say, we have the whole thing twisted. People, you know, people do what they have to do to survive.
Oh yeah.
And if you have a community that the resources are sucked out, you know, you can't blame people for doing what they have to do to eat and sleep. Exactly. So, you know, and even with children, they're children. At the end of the day, these are children, right? If they don't have the proper guidance or the proper people because of whatever happens in their family, and we know social issues, you know, from adults down, you know, if we are not giving them the resources to become proper adults, then we failed them, you know, and I disagree with the SCOTUS decision, and I think our local politicians and our state politicians need to step up to the plate. We can change this if President Biden and Kamala Harris is really about it, and they're saying what they want to do. You know, they need to push these the human infrastructure plan, what they're talking about. They need to just be like Republicans and push it through the Senate, get it passed, and invest in people that need it. You know, I that's what I think. You know, and if they don't do that, then you know we have to figure out something else. But also you have the schools and the politicians, right? Why don't we partner with BMW and all these other and I've said it many times on air. You know, Mount Vernon High School. You know, why don't you partner with BMW? You have the space. BMW has the money. Come in and do and certify these young men and women to be BMW mechanics. Instead of stealing BMWs, they'll open up a mechanic shop and fixing it.
Absolutely.
So we have to start thinking out of the box and partner with GM, BMW, and get these vocational. Our politicians don't want to think out the box. They don't want to.
Exactly. And listen, if you think about it, Damon, if you think about it, most of our young people know STEM, right? They know science, they know math, right? Right. Exactly. So if we were to partner with like a Regeneron or something of that nature to really create a hybrid training model, our young people can take that skill they learned on the street and flip that to a career. I really can. I really think that is possible. And I think when you say, are you about that life? We at the youth shelter here are about it. Okay. So we believe in the power of second chances, and we are out here daring our young people to dream. And Bakari told us, Bakari Sellers was our guest speaker back in October, and he told our guys to dream with their eyes wide open. He said, dream with your eyes wide open, and what makes you mad and fuels anger, take that and use that as a catalyst to make change. And that's what we're really doing with our young people. We're saying, okay, if you were a drug dealer, then you know STEM, right? So we're going to take those skills and make those transferable. We're going to show you, we're going to actually put you in a training program. And now you'll be able to make a career from that. And that's really what we're doing. We're taking young people and allowing their lived, because sometimes lived experiences is what is going to help you get along in this life. If you want to be technical about it, sometimes it's not about all the degrees. It's not about all the things you went to school and educated yourself on. You can take life's experiences, bottle them up, and those could be your champion to really help you move forward. And I can say that personally as a woman who I didn't get here by all the degrees I had, but it was because someone saved me from myself. I had my family to undergird me. I had the community to undergird me, and they helped push me. And I tell my young people all the time here, when you channel your pain into your purpose, it becomes the driving force for you to want to do right and want to do well. And so that's what we're about it here at the shelter.
That's what's up.
We actually covered that. If you see.
I know. I'm glad to meet you guys because I'm like, they're giving us good PR. They're out there. And I seen you, AJ, on a lot of I'm on a lot of calls here in Mount Vernon sometimes, just because while we're housed here, I want to make sure we're community, right? I want to make sure that the youth shelter is embedded in community, because I really believe it's community that's going to save our young people, right? And I say this again, the youth shelter cannot do this work alone. It is a whole collective system that we need to put our hands together. And, I would say this about nonprofits because I've worked in it for years. Sometimes we get territorial because every young person is attached to a dollar sign. So sometimes we don't like to share. But I think we're in a world where we need to stop that, right? We need to stop operating in silos. And as a unit, a collective unit, we need to come together to do some transformational work in our own communities, in our own backyards. And so for me, I'm really big on getting involved, getting out there, getting our young people out there, because I think it's also this notion of the community you roamed, you can do right there, and you can help change somebody else's life and trajectory. So with our young people, I'm all about paying it forward, right? So yeah, you messed up, but now you can help other young people who are in your situation get to where they need to go. So there's a lot of work to do.
I want to before this is something that we definitely first I want to open door policy. We need you to come back. As often as you need to. We need to continue this conversation.
Absolutely.
But before our next guest comes on and we run out of time, how do people get in touch with you? What do you need from people in the community that might be saying, what can I do to help? Those kind of, I want you to get that out there. Make sure we cover that.
So the first thing we need men. We need men to step up, and we need men to mentor these young men. And I'm not talking about in the traditional sense of big brother, big sister kind of model. These are young men who kind of need a man to help them with men things, right? And young people who are about to go home, who need that not fatherly figure, but that brother, that older young male in their life to kind of help them a long life's journey, right? I think about a lot of my young men here when I got here, and I said, you don't know how to tie a tie. That's like a rite of passage for a young man. So I think just naturally we need mentorships for our young men. I think also we need to think about opportunities for our young men jobs, training. Also, what we want to do is what we call a session on active career exploration. So these young men can dare to dream about their futures, right? So people to come in and share with them about different jobs. Dr. Bob would be a perfect example, because he was once one of these young men to say, you can dream with your eyes wide open. Look at me, I'm a prime example. So I think also there's this, I am also in our theme for 2021 is suited in success. And I think when young men particularly see themselves in a different light. So a lot of our young men are known by their mugshot, right? So we're doing a series here, mugshots to headshots. Now you have a professional headshot, right? You also have a customized suit. We want our young men to know that when you look good, you feel good, right? And you start to think about yourself in a different element. Your pants are not baggy. And so we're suiting them in success, but that also carries a notion of not just looking good, but internally self-care, self-preservation, making sure you're equipped with things. So how to get in touch. There's a lot that we need at the youth shelter, but we do virtual open houses. We do open doors. I would say come in and talk to our young people, because they get a credit. You need to hear from them, because I think that you'll see that the experiences have shaped them to get here. They're truly young people that need someone to help set them up and let them hit the alley hoop on their own, right? Put them in a position of power and they'll take it from there. And so I encourage everyone to learn about the youth shelter. You can visit our website at www.ysow.org. You can call us at 914-668-4702. I am Joanne Dunn. I am I'm not new anymore because I've been here a year now plus, but I am the new executive director. I am ushering in some female power. And I love the work that we do. And they say, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, because this work for me is really personal here.
Well, I need you to email me at blackwestchester@gmail.com.
Okay.
I have one or two people that are texting me now that they want to definitely have a conversation with you, and they may be of some help. So definitely, yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely. And I would just say, lastly, we did a lot of talking in criminal justice, right? There was a lot of police reform. They had like a lot of community groups. I think that what we didn't do was have a lot of closed sessions with justice-involved youth, or justice-involved people, right? When we think about policing and the people that were most affected on the lines, we didn't have enough conversation with them to think about how we can transform the experiences of others that may be coming behind them. And so I offer this notion of really having closed door sessions with our young people, because I think that would allow people a space to really understand, like Damon said, how we can invest in the social aspects of our communities so that we can stop the pipeline. We can't build around them anymore. We need to build with them. Exactly. And so I say that because I think that that's where we need to go as a community, as a system. These folks are my moms, my uncles, my aunts, your cousins. They're not criminals. They're people. And I think that we need to put our arms around them and allow them, because if we don't provide them the opportunities, we're just continuing to marginalize the disparities.
I want to say this for the people that are listening and that will listen. There's people that sit around and be like, they raise their children, or they don't have children, or this is not their problem. Not investing in them now, they become your problem when you look like rent money and they knock you upside the head and take your pocketbook or something.
When you look like rent money, right?
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, you look like dinner or rent money, you know what I'm saying, later on, because they had no options, and now that's where they are. So don't wait. Like we say, I go out with Snug in them sometimes, and one of the things they say, don't wait for it, senseless gun violence to hit your doorstep before you get involved. Don't wait till then. Like, get involved now.
Exactly.
And as a community, we can do so much.
And we've got to dig deeper. A lot of our young people are getting arrested because of senseless gun crimes. I have a lot of young people who are getting arrested for loaded gun charges or unloaded gun charge. And we as a society, we need to figure out what's this access point that young people are even getting guns, right? So exactly. I think that, we got a lot of work to do, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeve. And I think that, we need more snugs. We need more people to come out in these non-traditional hours to really access what's happening in our community. It's not going to happen Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We got to get out there. We got to figure out, I think, just going back to what happened in New Rochelle, right? What happened, it's really a lot of lives lost here right now when you think about it, right? And so there's a lot of work to do. And I don't never stand to kind of, say that, I stand for someone committing a crime. But I think when I think about a young person who's going to lose their life or their youth or their essence, I think that that's a life lost too as well. And I think that there's a lot more work to do to dig in how we can stop, like I said, diversion, not even just diversion from incarceration, but to stop all of this in our communities, especially communities of color.
We had Yusef Salam on. He's one of the exonerated 5 now, formerly for Central Park 5. And we had his mother on. And his mother was like, what they don't understand is, he was incarcerated for something he didn't do, but we all served that sentence with him. You understand? I'm like, she was saying, as a mother, I served that sentence with him. You know what I'm saying? My son went to clear his name at the police station and never came home. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so
at times, some real time.
Yeah. So Bob, you
I just wanted to chime in on the point that Joanne made about the need to expand opportunities for youth. Too often when we have these conversations, the notion of a dearth of jobs will be invoked, and I think people quickly gloss over it. And I was recently doing some research from some new data sets that have been put out by the Department of Labor. It's called the Local Employment Dynamic set. And according to the latest figures they have, the city of Mount Vernon only employs 3,696 persons from the city of Mount Vernon. All other jobs for residents of Mount Vernon are sought outside of the city. This really highlights the gravity of the crisis that we're confronting, because actually this is the state of affairs in almost every Black community across the United States. Probably lots of white communities as well, and everyone in between. But we have especially high levels of unemployment, and the economic dynamic that we've set in motion in our communities is not going to absorb all these people. And that's a much bigger issue. You're right, we can put in place some of the diversionary programs. We can try to have some sort of humane criminal justice system in the event someone does something wrong, that for which a more serious penalty of some kind is appropriate. But this is all after the horses out the barn, water under the bridge. We're not creating enough jobs.
I agree with you. Prior to me coming to the youth shelter, I ran workforce development programs, not only locally here in the county, but nationwide, going across the country, talking about, if we want to talk equity, we need to talk jobs, right? We need to talk, how to build wealth, jobs, right? And so I agree with you, Dr. Bob, that this is a bigger conversation in regards to the, economic drivers here in the city. What's driving the economics here, jobs. I think also looking at the IDA about like, who are we trying to bring into the city to really kind of bring in more economic drivers here. So there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen. I think that, and I'll say this loud on the air, Mount Vernon is a chocolate city. It's the one of its kind in Westchester County. And I think that, there's a lot of work to do. But I think with the mayor, I think also with, we kind of got to be eyes wide open right now to really figure out what's broken, what's not working, and then really try to talk to it. I think just, we could, and then I think, Bob, like going back to a notion, like we could create jobs, but if we don't have housing, like there's this notion of like, you need to live well, eat well, and, live, eat, and play, right? Like live, eat, and play. You want to live, eat, and play where you live at, but we might bring jobs to Mount Vernon, but then have we also tackled housing, right? To make sure there's equitable housing here in the city of Mount Vernon and other areas of color. So there's a lot more conversations that need to be had. And I think what happens though, when we bring jobs and we bring housing to a community, the most vulnerable populations get left out, right? Those who have criminal background or those who have, they're not making enough money. Those folks get marginalized in essence because they can't compete with other folks to get into those opportunities.
I want you to definitely utilize us, Black Westchester, where you can to get the word out. And and we definitely want to have you back on, because this can't be a one-time conversation. This has to be an ongoing conversation.
Would love to.
And anything we can do to help bring the word out, especially to your organization, to the work that you do, to the work that we all collectively need to do. I mean, we definitely count us in. Definitely count us in.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me here. It's Sunday. I just came from church earlier today. It was Family and Friends Day, so I hadn't been to church in a while. So it was good to go there. And then I think this show just affirmed why I'm here at the shelter. I think that, again, talking it out publicly allows me, it reminds me that there's much more work to do. And I think as a system, we can continue to reimagine youth justice here in Westchester and abroad. So I thank you all for having me, and I would love to continue these conversations with all of you.
Absolutely. And okay. I've been looking for my next guest. I'm going back and forth with him. He was.
When you need.
They kept telling me he was in the waiting room, and I'm like, no, he's not. And I'm talking to his people. He just popped in. He's smiling right now. So I guess. Any last words I didn't ask you? And
No, I'm glad to be here. It is nice finally officially meeting you all. I know of you all. You all have an open door to come to this shelter and to connect. I would love to further these conversations, as I said before. Dr. Bob, Damon, I know your daughter here. I think Cupcake Cutie, AJ Woodson. So you guys are no stranger to the youth shelter and to me. And so this is a relationship I'd like to continue.
Absolutely. And we have our next guest in the house, Eric Adams, Brooklyn Borough President. We've been just talking about youth justice. We had the executive director of the youth shelter of Westchester. We're definitely having a very conversation that you would definitely be interested in. And I just wanted to let y'all meet each other real quick before.
Hi, Eric, because I'm about to jump off, but I'd love to talk with you.
I would love that. Good to see you, Joanne.
You too. You
I
too.
would let y'all get connected.
I don't know. Can we leave comments in the chat?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so I'm going to leave my information there, and please reach out to me, Eric, Damon, Dr. Bob, AJ, and anybody in the live audience. Please, I would love to connect further. Community is how we're going to get this work done.
Absolutely, let's get it done. And like I said, we're here when you need us.
Absolutely.
And Damon, your voice, you're muted, Damon. We haven't heard nothing you said.
First, we're going to get him in the mayor's office, then we're going to get him in the governor's office, and you take
All right. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you. Let this not be the last time we see you here.
Absolutely not. I'll be back. So get used to
Thank you, Joanne.
You can even add me on Sunday. I might be co-host for you guys one day.
Hey, don't joke. Don't joke. Damon's not here often, and Bobby busy doing research papers. I might need to call you one day.
Well, call me up. I'm game.
All right,
guys. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Yes.